The Almost Perfect Podcast.
Welcome to the Almost Perfect Podcast, a celebration of fuck-ups, failures, and falling flat on your face. This is a podcast that believes you can learn from experience, but that experience doesn't have to be your own. Hi, I'm Bob Perfect, and I'm a functional fuck-up. Let's learn from somebody else's mistakes. And today we're learning from Troy Tesla. Now, Troy is a stand-up comedian who's begrudgingly a promoter as well, but he's pretty good at the whole promoting thing, which is why he's a relatively successful comedian these days. In a short period of time, he's actually become quite successful in a short period of time. A lot of people know who Troy is. He's done 1-hour shows. He does shows in hotels. He's got partnerships with different kinds of people. Yeah, he's really hustled hard. In about 3 or 4 years, I think he's been doing stand-up comedy. So definitely someone you can learn from if you want to improve your game in a lot of different aspects. Troy's also originally from Zimbabwe, so we chat a bit about that. Although he's been calling Durban home mostly since 2006. So I consider him to be a Durbanite, like, of sorts. Definitely an honorary Durbanite who has just moved to Joburg recently. So we get into that as well. We discuss why he's done it and how he's finding the move. It's a really cool chat. I know I say that about all of them, but I had a good time, and it was cool of Troy to jump on at the last minute. We did this one last night after UKZN. We did jokes and jazz. So we chatted a little bit about that gig. It's a gig that Troy's been putting on for we're going into the 3rd year now. So this was the 9th one. And it was a little bit disappointing for Troy because it wasn't as successful as some of the other ones, but it was still a dope night. And so we discussed that, we discussed the gig, we discussed how to promote, and we learned, I definitely think Troy's got the hustle down in terms of stand-up comedy. He knows where he wants to go, and he just goes there. He's also just tenacious. He doesn't take no for an answer. Well, he does. He just keeps going until he finds someone who says yes. So, yeah, this one's definitely a motivating one, and I hope you get a lot of motivation out of it, and also learn a little bit. I found out some interesting tidbits about Zimbabwe and a few other things. I also mistakenly say, I've always got to do a correction or two before this thing. I mistakenly say that Durban has 9 million people, but I think it's more like somewhere between 4 to 6, depending on which thing you Googled. So yeah, not 9 million people in Durban, might be, but that's such a dumb thing to even worry about. And yeah, if you enjoy this podcast, you know what to do. You can like it. You can like it on Facebook at the Almost Perfect Podcast. Please go do that if you haven't yet. That stuff helps you see it a little bit more, because maybe you haven't subscribed yet. Maybe you haven't done that. Maybe you haven't subscribed on the platform of your choice, but in particular iTunes or Spotify. Maybe you haven't given a review yet, so you could also do that. On Facebook, you can give a little 5-star thing there. You can leave comments so more people can see it. It's also, if you like the Facebook page, then you can share stuff from the Facebook page. So, then you can get the word out, and you can help me get the word out about this. So, yeah, Facebook's one of the ways. Also, a bunch of people joined the Twitter today, actually. Well, today and yesterday. So thank you very much. You can follow us at almost_podcast. And I'm not doing a lot with the Twitter account, so that's just a place where you can just go to find the latest episode, although we haven't yet got there, so I'm doing the backlog. I've been doing like 2 or 3 a week because I don't want to spam or anything like that. But yeah, so we'll eventually have it every Wednesday. It'll come out on the Twitter, and I don't think I'm really going to use the Twitter for anything else. So if you don't like being spammed on Twitter, you're not going to be spammed on Twitter there. You can just go, same thing actually with the Facebook, very little communication, mostly just putting out the vibes. But if you want more, then cool, you can actually get more. You can go to Patreon. So patreon.com/almostperfect is a subscription service where you can get a little bit more out of the podcast. The podcast is going to come at you for free forever. You're never going to have to pay for this. I promise. I'm always going to put it out for free. But if you do want to, chip in a little bit to help me make the podcast better, like after this month with the Patreon, what we've made, I'm going to be able to get some mic stands. So you won't hear people like jostling on the mic, which is such an annoying thing for me, and now I'm making you aware of it, and you're going to hear it, and you're probably going to hate it, and I'm sorry for putting that in your head. But as soon as I get mic stands, then hey, don't even have to worry about that. So that's going to be cool because of the people who have already signed up to the Patreon. Now, if you sign up to Patreon, you can pay $1, you can pay $5, and you get different benefits. Like, you'll know who the next guests are, depending on if it goes according to plan or not. And you can also ask guest questions, and you can also sign up and be a part of giveaways. So I'm giving away, I know it's a nerdy little thing, so if you're a nerd, you'll love it. If you're a Potterhead, you'll love it. I'm giving away a Harry Potter trading card game starter kit from back in the day, from 2001. It's still unwrapped, it's still in its plastic, and yeah, I'm going to be giving that away to a patron. And then when we get to 10 patrons, which, by the way, we are one away from. So if you've been thinking about signing up to the Patreon, do it before the end of this month, so the 31st of this month, and then I will give away a case of Durban Poison. So Durban Poison beer, South Africa's first cannabis lager, could be yours, an entire case for free-ish, kind of, because obviously you're paying to sell it to the Patreon. But yeah, I'm going to be giving a case away as soon as we get to 10 patrons. The month that happens, I'm giving away a case of Durban Poison. So we've got 9 patrons at the moment. One more. That's all we need. And we're giving away a case of Durban Poison. If that sounds good to you, go to patreon.com/almostperfect. A big shout out to Stephen Olivier. A big shout out to Ryan Reno. I don't know if I've shouted out Vishendra Naidu on one of the previous podcasts, so shout out to Vishendra. And shout outs to my girlfriend, Paige Finesse, who's the most recent subscriber to the Patreon. You guys are all amazing. Thank you so much for signing up. I really appreciate it. And that's that. That's the whole diatribe. Other than that, you know what you can do. You can leave comments. You can, leave stars. You can share. You can do all of those things and just let people know about the podcast. Let's spread the word. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for all the kind words, by the way. If you follow me on social media, I've been like a little bit down. Like, if you follow me on my Instagram, and a lot of people have inboxed me and been like really sweet and really kind and just really, got me in the right headspace to be able to put this out today. So thanks so much, cats. I really appreciate all the love and support. And here comes a podcast with Troy Tesla.
Actually, when I got into comedy, Jim Jeffries was the guy I watched, and I think the first comedian I watched before just before I started doing comedy. I was like, that guy is speaking my mind. Yeah, well, that was before the recent.
Well, that's the thing. Jim's like always been in my top 5, like in terms of stand-up comedy.
Oh, that dude's.
I know, like some people, because I'm a woke bloke at times, but at the same time, the comedy thing, the free speech thing, the whole. I do actually enjoy offensive comedy. I think it needs to be done.
I love it, especially in this PC culture.
I don't think,
got to challenge
especially in this PC culture, challenging PC culture. I think it's just about being smart. I think there's shitty offensive comedy that's just base level, like being offensive. And then there's clever shit that you like need to think about whether or not you're offended. Like, you're like, wait, that's fucked. Is that fucked up? No, that's fucked up. Oh, I'm laughing. Fuck. I like that. Like, I don't like just simple, like, oh, a Muslim guy, let's make a bomb joke.
Yeah. I mean, I've been guilty of the same thing at times. But
I know. That's why I said exactly that.
I'm being accused indirectly. This is actually turning into a roast, is it? To be honest, I think that the problem you have as a comedian, especially if you're operating in certain areas, so like in Durban, for instance, people are not so up to date, or at least the level where comedy is in the Durban area is not as advanced as some places. Joburg is even much more ahead. So the problem we have as artists is sometimes you want to make people laugh, but you don't want to lose them at the same time. So the challenge I have sometimes is you want to be woke and more current, but people are still living in the freaking 90s or 2000s. So you're trying to bridge the gap between making people laugh at the same time you want to carry them over. So in terms of how I do my comedy, typically, I always try to make a balanced approach between making the people laugh, because you want to give them value for their money, and because criticism is going to come. So at the same time, it eats you up as a comedian that you kind of lowering what you want to do, but at the same time, you want to give them value
the
and
same
also
time,
train them to transition forward.
But at the same time, you're not going to get booked again if you don't make people laugh.
Yeah, that's always the challenge, isn't it? Like I'll tell you, I've had so many bookings where I'm asked to, I'm given parameters to say, don't joke about this. You can joke about this. So
What are you normally told not to joke about?
well, it depends on the audience, to be honest. So, for example, I've been booked to do like MC a birthday party for a Muslim family. So, you can obviously guess which no-go areas I'm told not to get into, and it's like I want to do them, but
Well, why would you want to do that? Like that's not your job there. I mean, see, I just wouldn't take. I mean, I would take those gigs, I guess, and try to be funny, but I wouldn't ever think, let me like do like offensive Muslim jokes at this party.
Look, to be honest, I think that sometimes people are just fearful because they don't understand that or respect the fact that you're an artist with massive experience. An example is on the weekend, I was hired to MC a corporate function where there was 2 pastors in the audience. The first one was going to start with an opening prayer and the other one do the closing. And during that event, before we sat down and had a meeting, and one of the things they said, we're going to have pastors in the audience, so don't make fun of their religion. And with the recent
Only for 2
resurrection,
pastors. Wait, how many people were in the audience?
it was about maybe 150 or something.
And you have to tailor your material to 2 pastors.
The reason
that.
is, you know that pastors hold moral ground. They have high, they're
Oh,
very
so
influential.
if they
people,
laugh,
so-
then everyone else will laugh, and if they don't
See,
laugh,
that's what I did. So they told me, and I was like, because this is where it gets funnier. So in the same week that I was doing this event was the week that there was this resurrection fake slash story. So the funny thing was, I was like, the company that booked me was a funeral services company that essentially buries people. So I said to them,
yeah, you're gonna write a joke about that.
yeah, I'm definitely gonna want to do it. So I told them, I was like, this is the biggest joke you guys are giving me. It's right in front of me. You have 2 pastors in your audience who are going to be blessing your event, and you're trying to bury people, and these pastors are essentially resurrecting people, and you're telling me I shouldn't make jokes about this. So what I ended up doing was I said to them, and they said, don't do it. And I said, okay, I'm not going to do it.
I wouldn't have asked that.
And when I got up, I invited the pastor to come and open with a prayer. And as soon as he sat down, I was like, Pastor, look, just like the other guy who's been resurrected, he's a Zimbabwean looking for a job. And I'm a candidate because I can afford these funeral services. And I started negotiating with the pastor a deal of what the premiums are going to be for a resurrection. It was actually super funny for him and for the audience, to such a point that when the event ended, the organizers came to me and said, actually, that was the funniest thing you did. So it's a risk to take to do against what your bookers are asking you to do. But sometimes it works out.
But the thing is, you weren't trying to be offensive there. You weren't, you were trying to make a joke that's related to those things. There's a very, very big difference between being an offensive like comedian and someone who makes a joke about something that's happened. That's within, like people can be a bit too precious about no religious jokes. Like there's lots of religious jokes that you can tell that aren't offensive. Like,
True. To be honest, though, I think it always depends on the audience. So when we talk about religion, for instance, there's so much material you can do in religion, which is hilarious. But certain sectors of religion are more sensitive than others. The Muslim community, for instance, are a lot more. They're not as forgiving as Christians would be.
Well, it depends.
Generally speaking.
But anyway, I think the younger Muslim community actually is very open-minded and very forgiving and very cosmopolitan and chilled. So it depends. Like
it does depend, but I mean, to a degree, depending on the region of the world you're in, the difference in South Africa is a lot more liberal. So even the Muslims that live in South African society are a lot more open-minded. If you had to do the same thing in the Middle East, you're gonna get lashes.
Yeah, but you also, I mean, you're aware of that. You know that you don't go do gigs in the Middle East, and if you do, You tailor
You're gonna
material
bomb.
to it.
Lame.
Wow.
I have better jokes on stage to anyone who's listening.
He doesn't, to anyone who's listening.
Let's hope someone's gonna be listening.
Hopefully, at least 100 odd people listen to this thing each time, which is more people than were at our gig tonight. So tonight we did jokes and jazz, and it was not a bad night at all, but it was the worst one that like you've had, I would say, out of the 9.
Actually,
In
yes.
terms of audience.
In terms of turnout, it hasn't been the best one. I mean, partly the marketing wasn't as aggressive.
Because so for people who don't know, Troy is originally from Zimbabwe, has lived in Durban for the last how many years?
Since 2006, with breaks in between, but yeah.
So there you go. And then earlier this year you moved to Joburg, but you've been doing this gig called Jokes and Jazz for a few years now. 3 years now. This is the third year we're doing it.
Yeah.
And so you haven't really been here to promote the gig as
Not at
much
all.
as you usually would, because you were on campus at UKZN. You were able to get people like amped up by being there, by telling them about it.
Yeah.
And this one, not so much.
Pretty much. But I essentially just like broadcasted to people I still knew around. Hey, there's this show. I mean, it's a fantastic venue and everything. It's.
Just so people know, we had like about 30, 40 people there tonight.
Probably more. I
Probably
didn't
more.
count,
But
yeah.
But usually, like, you know, it's more like 100.
Yeah.
So it's you were feeling a little frustrated tonight.
Certainly. It's like when you use just certain consistency and it drops like that, it's almost like out of your element. So yeah, there's a measure of disappointment but I mean, I still try to give my best to make sure the audience enjoys it. So despite that, you want to give people a great show. I think we managed to do that.
Yeah, I think the audience tonight would have been incredibly happy with the show they got. I think I was pretty average. Like I got some good laughs. I made people laugh where I needed to, but I fucked up at certain points, and then I panicked, and then I was just like, I tried to salvage this, and then in my salvaging, I even forgot my own joke that I never forget. So, thank you very much for your time. And like, do you ever experience those moments where you're like, fuck it, like, I've done good enough. If I carry on, I'm going to lose I'm going to lose the goodwill I have. Let me rather bail now.
I get what you're saying. What I always have issues with is at times with gigs. See, there's one thing that's a major problem for me, which is, you could do so many shows, and for you as a comedian, you could have one bad gig, and for you it could be like, I can always come back from this because most of the time I do well. But then there's that one person in the audience who's watching you for the first time on your bad night,
and that's how they think you are all the time.
And they're gonna think you suck all the time, which is, I wish I could go back to certain gigs and just fix something just to impress that one person, because it goes a long way. Imagine in the future you're established and there's just this one person in your comment section is going, but it sucks, and I'm like, no, you just watched me on the wrong day.
Yeah, but every big comedian has that. Like Luis Agola has people saying he's not funny on Twitter all the time.
Yeah, I mean, he's like one of the funniest guys in the country.
Exactly, and that's not even just like, someone saw him on a bad day. That's people see him on TV all the time, and they're still like, I don't find this guy funny. So I don't know if worrying about, like, one person in the crowd not finding you funny on one night is that big a thing to stress about.
I take it seriously because I think if you want to play the long game in comedy, you want to try to be as consistent as possible.
Of course,
so
but the thing is,
little gigs that don't have that don't measure up to your usual consistency taint where you want to get.
Maybe, but you see, I see the long game being even longer, and that like you're going to fail along the way, that's not.
I mean, you wanna fail less times than you do well, ideally.
Ideally,
otherwise,
definitely.
you're not a comedian.
Of course, but also the failing can lead to being more successful. Like if you're willing to eat more shit, depending, because the thing is, okay, so to me, I've got a set that I could just pull out at any point if I want to just make the audience laugh. Like, that's something we can all do. Right? Like, you've got a set that you could do a 10 minutes, like, off the top that like, is going to kill.
Yeah, I mean...
But that's not the point to me. Like, the point is to try and do more. The point is to try and experiment. The point is to try and, like, put yourself out there a bit more and be a bit more, like...
Yeah.
Like, not as... Like, consistency is obviously a key in this thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, for me, I'm at a point where it's, like... Experimental is also very important. It's
true.
Like,
true.
I want to be great at this. I don't want to be good. Like, so I can see a lot of people who are good in this country at the moment. And not even at the moment, a lot of older comedians who are good comedians. They do the thing. They've got the mechanics and they can do their thing. But I watch them and there's nothing about them that makes me go, you're great. I just go, you're a good comedian, but I don't care. Like, I really don't. Listening to you bores the fuck out of me. Like, I can see the mechanics at work, but I don't care about what you have to say. And so to me, I'm trying to develop more in my routine so that I can create that almost. Like, people actually caring and people wanting. So I'm going to put myself out there a bit more. I'm going to fail a lot more because I want to get to that quicker, if that makes sense. I don't want to just be seen as a good comedian.
I get what you're saying, but I think that personally, I've had almost like these 3 phases in my comedy. Trying to understand how to be funny, how to impress an audience, how to kill, how to be consistent. And the first phase, which was in my first 6 months to a year of comedy, was trying to just understand if I'm funny. So I would write as many jokes as I could and I would try to pick the best ones and just do that. And then once I had a basic amount of content, after that I moved to the second phase.
I think that's how we all start.
Yeah, I think we all try to just be generally funny. And then you move on to the second stage now where you understand you start getting more calls to do different shows. So you're trying to adapt and write different material for each audience. Then you move into that phase. Then the third phase, which is where I feel like I'm into now,
is who am I?
Is the phase where I'm like, what is my voice? And I know I'm funny. If you don't laugh, it's because you don't get the jokes. It's not because I'm not funny.
But then there is also the thing of, you're not making it funny for them, and that's your job. Like,
yeah, I mean,
so that's my biggest issue, is that, like, I'm not good enough at simplifying my stuff at times or making my jokes funny for the audience that's there. Like, I need to go back to, I used to have, that's what I'm saying, like, so I've got my sets that, like, I know can work with general audiences, and I actually need to go back to using them when, my other stuff isn't working. Mm-hmm. But a part of me is just so, like, dead set on just trying to do the shit I'm doing at the moment. But it's so specific, like you're saying, like, for like a smarter audience at times. Like, so do you find the same issues, I would assume, like with some of your jokes?
Yeah, to a degree. But what I've also managed to do now is, because I've written quite a lot of material, so I easily kind of can figure out what each audience needs.
And do you figure it out before the show, like before you go on, or whilst you're on stage?
It's a bit of both. It depends. If I see who my audience is before I get on, I sort of know what to do immediately. And in South Africa, because some of our audience are very separated by demographic, so each time you kind of like, if I do those jokes, they're not going to be relatable here. So you already know what's not going to work. And then there's certain material which is quite universal.
But then don't you find yourself, like, so for me, if I do that, like, I wouldn't do half my material. Like, if I start looking at the audience going like that, then I never get to tell the jokes I want to tell.
Yeah, it's always a problem, I'll be honest. Because I think that because in the current market we exist, we also have very distinct audiences. So you wouldn't expect to go to, say, upmarket, wide audience and start doing jokes about home music.
I was going to say that.
No idea what that was. I had that interesting experience today where I threw some material, which I was kind of like, let me just throw it. I know it's funny, but I don't know if my audience is particularly going to be I don't know if I should say find it relatable, but really just being aware that this type of music even exists for me to do jokes about it. So sometimes there's different approaches where you have to kind of educate an audience first.
But you see,
before giving them jokes about a certain subject.
See, so that's what people have been telling me, and that's something I need to work on a bit more. Is like, you can tell the audience before the joke almost. Like,
Yeah.
did you hear about this thing? This is that thing. Then you
then
can
joke
make
about it.
make that a little bit funny, even like
Yeah.
your descriptor of it, and then you can go, here's the joke I wanted to tell.
That is
Whereas
true.
you could also, to other audiences, just go, do you know pop music? And they're like, yes. And then
Yeah.
you're just like, sweet, here's
Yeah.
the joke.
The-
Whereas other people will be like, no. And you go, well, this is what it is. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's preparation in that regard, I guess, is the key.
True. It's preparing the audience actually.
Yeah.
But
But being prepared for the audience as well. Like,
true.
so
True.
knowing ahead of time, like, so if I go into an older white audience, how will I prepare this joke for them?
Certainly.
Maybe. I mean, I don't do that, and that's something I'm starting to consider. So
Yeah, I mean, this is a craft where you have to learn. It's all my general approach usually when I approach an audience is I need to be as smart as the dumbest person in the audience.
see, people say that all the time, and I hate that because, like, what I love about comic books, okay, about Stan Lee in particular, is he wrote for the adult. He wrote, like, his, vocabulary was fantastic, and that's why my vocabulary is a lot better, is because of Stan Lee writing for the adult, writing emotive stuff that was, I got it because, I wanted to get it because it was older, because it was out of my reach, because, like, if I didn't understand a word, I'd read up on it. But maybe not everyone's like that. So, I don't know. Like, I want to cater stuff to people like me. And that's the issue, I guess.
You know what's tricky? I think what makes the most success... Excuse me, I have Ebola. I think what makes the most successful comedians more successful is adaptability.
Yeah.
So in as much as I have a certain audience I have in mind, people I want to appeal to, but then I also want to reach the widest audience I can also reach. So there's a certain point where you gotta be saying to yourself, I want to talk about this, but I want to reach other people who are wider. So the perfect example of this is related to something we're talking about now, which is preparing the audience. So I have, being a Zimbabwean, there's certain material I know will crush it if I'm doing a Zimbabwean audience. But if I'm doing a South African audience, it's going to be irrelevant. But if you prepare your audience, you can widen the margin. There is a set I was doing at the Winston, which is our regular weekly comedy club in Durban.
Well, it was
Every Wednesday. But we might bring it back eventually.
not weekly, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's a set I did there one of the days, and you actually mentioned, because you were hosting the show, and you said to me, "Oh, this is information I didn't know," which was about Zimbabwe having gay presidents, and that was information people wouldn't know about. But I gave background information to it. I said the context, and then I got into the jokes, and everyone could find it hilarious. The point wasn't necessarily for it to be relatable, but for people to just know enough to find it funny. So in the comedy context, it's, maybe I'm drifting off what we're really talking about.
No, but like about setting up the jokes. Like it's
Setting
about
up the joke, and sometimes it's about appealing to people, but sometimes it's not always about appealing, but about just setting up something which is funny generally. Because
making
people
it
are there to
relatable.
laugh, and they can still find it funny. So in South Africa, no one cares that Zimbabwe had a first gay president, but it's a funny story to tell.
Okay, what do
And-
you mean that Zimbabwe had the first gay president?
Well, Kenan Banana was gay from 1980 until 1987. Before Mugabe, he was gay. They found out he was gay because he was touching his bodyguards. Side note, I used to think gay guys are weak until I read about Banana. I was very impressed. It was
He changed your idea of what gayness meant.
yeah.
And you make jokes about that, but obviously making jokes about that with regards to, how Zimbabwe's been over the last few years, because isn't homosexuality outlawed there now?
Yeah, it's
And even talking
Well,
about it, like
well, technically speaking, homosexuality is not illegal as being gay. It's sodomy. So
Yeah, well,
the
that's
sexual aspect of it is
Yeah,
the gay.
it's
So you could have a fling, but no strings attached. I mean, no, coitus involved. They'll not arrest you to be like, I have a boyfriend. But then if you say we're doing it, then they're gonna arrest you. It's technical.
and doing jokes about that sort of thing.
I have received a number of death threats. Just threats, generally violent threats, and from doing that kind of stuff. And I find that it's I don't know what happened to my voice right now. But
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Usually when like people send me death threats, I get a little croaked up as well. So
yeah, maybe it's that. I'm already choking, but I don't know. It's something that I'm fortunate to have been living in South Africa, so none of these violent threats ever materialized to anything.
But you've been sent threats from Zimbabwe.
I don't know where they are. It's social media, so it's not like you can really tell it's coming from China or Zimbabwe or South Africa. It's hard to say, but I've had like local blogs repost one of my videos. I had to take it down eventually because I was getting a little bit scared, because I remember doing a show in Maritzburg at one point, and I didn't do the joke on that night, but somebody came to me and they said, I'm on my work with the Zim government, and
We're watching you.
Yeah, we're watching you, and don't do that stuff again. I was just like, whatever. I just ignored the guy, but deep down I was shaking. It's one of those things that I'm not sure even about going to perform at home at some point, which is where I should like go do and make some waves there. I would love to, but
Well, it makes sense, but I mean, freedom of speech is a big deal in stand-up comedy, and that's not exactly the place where you can speak as freely as you'd like.
yeah, freedom of speech is essential to comedy. I mean, comedy in itself is about, people actually don't always miss this, which I find funny, is comedy is about the jokes. It's not about, the intention isn't really to offend or even spread a message. Sometimes you can spread a message as a side consequence. But it's about being funny.
No, see, I think being funny is the base level thing that you're meant to do.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
But I think there's lots of messages in comedy. I think if you're not trying to put your viewpoint into the world, whatever, maybe you're a pure comedian in that regard. But at the same time,
I'm talking the purity of comedy is just about being funny.
Of course, but what I love about comedy is that people get to express, their viewpoints of the world, whether I agree with it or not.
I agree with that.
People get to do it. I get annoyed when it's like just hacky, like irrelevant shit, like, rape jokes and shit like that. You're just like, ugh, come on. Like, if you're going to try and write a rape joke in 2019, you've got some fucking work to do.
Yeah,
that's
true.
the truth, because they've all been written and most of them are shit.
This is like one of the most difficult things I've been finding about comedy lately is I haven't written much because I feel like almost everything has been written about.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the hardest things about it, but it is about putting your perspective on it. See, that's where it matters. That's where coming into things on your own is important.
The reason why I've said that is because, I've heard these stories of comedians stealing jokes, which is something that happens every day.
Yes.
But at the same time, I've also had moments where I write jokes I haven't even performed yet, and I see someone doing something similar. Not word for word, but it's like the same idea.
Oh man,
is coming out.
I've got a joke that I had that I was still telling even after I saw the guy do it, but now I'm not going to do it anymore because whatever, I don't need to. I've written more jokes, but literally I wrote a joke that I know I wrote. I wrote it, and then word for word I heard someone else tell it in a different city who had never seen me perform, who I'm pretty sure no one told him the joke, that just said the joke pretty much exactly the same way that I wrote it. And I was like, well, you know what? If you're going to write that joke, that's pretty much how you're going to write it. So, cool. Yeah. I'm not going to tell anymore. And I spoke to him afterwards. I was like, Just so you know, in case anyone comes up to you and is like, yo, I've heard someone else do that joke. Like, I've done the same thing. But it is crazy that you can have that. But then there are also the situations where people do just steal jokes. There are people who do it all the time. You can't go like, oh no, that guy might have stolen that joke. It's like, no, they stole that joke. And how do you feel about that?
I don't know what to do sometimes. What I can say is there are times when maybe someone was nice enough to come and tell you that this idea is already done, then you can maybe possibly put it away. A classic example is there was a joke I told you I wanted to write, which was about how white privilege is reversed in my home country, which is Zimbabwe. That you've got black people running everything, we own everything.
Oh yeah, Richard Pryor.
Yeah, and then you told me Richard Pryor mentioned this, and this is something in the 80s when he came to Zimbabwe and had a similar experience. And at that time, I had never watched a single clip by Richard Pryor, but the same idea just came to me, and practically I was like, this could be an interesting perspective to bring to comedy. And it turns out a comedy legend had come to Zimbabwe.
And that was the first thing he thought.
And that was the first thing he thought. So it really is a difficult situation. So some comedians use the approach of saying, I'm not going to watch comedy because sometimes you can sort of come up with an idea and then realize you watched it somewhere else and channeled it as your own idea. And then my approach has been to watch as much comedy as I can, so at least I eliminate. So it's tricky in that sense that if your memory isn't good enough, you could reshuffle an idea that you watched someone else do and think it's your own.
See, I don't mind if I reshuffle somebody else's idea. Like, that's okay. We can all get inspired from different places and take things in different ways. It is just the people who sit down and take stuff off the internet and take stuff from other comedians. That I've got an issue with. Like, mistakes happen, you know, like... in comedy, like, that crossover is going to happen a lot, and it's fine. It's not like you can tell when it's intentional. You can tell when people are doing it like on purpose. Like, I don't think there's a big issue with it in terms of people accidentally, you know, telling the same jokes.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing because also nowadays we're existing.
Okay, Trey wants me to mention a load shedding line because that's the kind of comedy he writes. But yeah, batteries just went out there. Should have been a little bit more prepared. But we were talking about joke stealing and stuff. But that's kind of whatever. I mean, people do it. I hate it personally, but you just carry on working. But do you ever feel... No, like, I have to ask. Do you ever feel awkward being on a lineup where people have, like, stolen jokes? Like, how do you feel about it?
I've been on a lineup where someone does my joke before I go up. And the one time it happened, I approached a guy, well, through WhatsApp now after the show, because I didn't want to, you know, confront him in front of people. And then I sent him a clip of me doing the exact same 2-minute bit, which I recorded 2 years ago. And I was just like, hey, man, this is awfully similar to what you did. So I just thought I'd let you know. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just said that. And he was kind of cool about it. And I was like, yeah, maybe because, you know, I have sort of evidence. And because he was like, yeah, this was dope joke. I wrote it a month ago. And I was just like, cool. And then after that, it was awkward. Even just like meeting and talking to the person. I do wish there was some kind of protection for artists where we could copyright our jokes somehow. But it's very difficult to police and things like that. So
it really is, man.
I don't know what the future holds in terms of protecting your jokes in that way.
Yeah, I don't know what the future holds in terms of, like, even art, you know, like, once the AI takes over and we have to fight off nanobots and, you know, global
I don't
warming.
think they'll have a sense of humor.
No, I don't think we're going to be able to joke our way out of, you know, the apocalypse. Oh, man. So why did you get into stand-up comedy?
I got into comedy... Well, that's such a good question.
What do you mean? It's the most basic question to ask someone.
It is basic. Why I got into comedy. So the short version of the story is, I was walking home one day and I was trying to flirt with a girl. This is the inciting incident. I'm walking home and I'm trying to flirt with this girl, and it clearly wasn't working because she said to me, haha, you're so funny, maybe you should try stand up. And I was like, oh, thank you very much. And then I get home and a friend of mine was there. He was watching a Jim Jeffries clip, and I just sat next to him and I was like, this guy is speaking my mind, and deep down this person told me I should try stand up. So I was just like, hey dude, this guy speaks regular things I think of, so maybe I should try stand up. Like, why? I was like, yeah, somebody told me earlier today I should get into stand up. So then but the
so
confidence,
your rejection is what actually got you into stand up.
yeah. I was in a big show the other day and the same lady asked me for tickets and I was like, fuck you. But then I was also like, thank you at the same time, because she inspired me. But my history goes back to third grade, where I started doing public speaking. So the idea of speaking in front of people was never something foreign to me. It was something I could easily do, but in terms of finding the rechanneling to comedy was kind of something I had to figure out.
So you weren't like just, even though you were told that you were naturally funny, you didn't think you were?
I wouldn't have thought of getting into comedy if it wasn't for that inciting incident. So speaking in front of people
really,
you'd
never thought about it before, other than speaking in front of people. You're like, I'm going to speak in front of people later, but like you didn't think comedy was a thing.
I used to loathe comedy before I started doing it. It was on that particular day. I used to watch Chris Rock and even not actually used to watch them. I would have friends watch comedy.
And that's why go to their houses and it'd be on, and like
I would visit people. It'd be on. I would probably just step outside, just not really caring. It wasn't my thing at all. Just like I used to look down on it. It's stupid, it's dumb. Until I started doing comedy was when I started appreciating it. Which is why even when you told me about Richard Pryor in that particular situation, I didn't even know who he was. So I had to go back and watch a lot of things.
I remember you were staying at my place maybe a year ago or so, and when you told me that joke, and I was like, I remember telling you, that was Richard Pryor. I have a knack for doing that. I tell people when I've heard their jokes before, because I've probably heard your joke before because I watch comedy every day. I'm gonna be honest, and that's the thing I do. I watch tons of comedy every single day, and so I've kind of. I also worry about my jokes, but that's also maybe why I try to make my jokes too difficult to get. It's it's going to be a puzzle because then no one has ever written this before because no one finds it funny.
I always think of comedy also as the art of setting these little puzzles.
No, entirely.
For people to get, and then once they unlock the puzzle, they find the humor there. And then sometimes the audience is just dumb, man. Sorry to say it to our listeners.
Yeah, it's like
sometimes
some of you aren't gonna get out of that. What are those mystery room things? Those escape rooms.
Yeah,
you're gonna be there for the whole hour.
It happens. It happens.
You're not gonna figure it out.
It's painful for a comedian sometimes where you're like, I really sat down on this joke and I knitted it so well and nobody gets it.
Because that's also the thing is you're told word economy matters, and you try to make sure that the joke's tight as possible, so as few words as possible. Like a Jimmy Carr joke, you're like, cool, how do I get this as precise and succinct? So you cut down words, you make sure you're not giving it too much. Like we were saying earlier, where you explain the joke. Now it's the exact opposite thing of you're like, here's the joke in its perfect form, and people are just
people don't get it.
Huh?
It's so painful to experience that, but sometimes you just gotta continue.
But with that, do you ever doubt yourself, or do you just go, nah, it's just this audience?
I think I've matured to a point where I'm like, if people don't laugh, it's their problem.
Really? You think that's maturity?
I think so. The reason is, I think that once you, as I said, comedy has different phases. So I've been that person who, if I'm I don't take to stage a joke which I think is not ready.
I do that constantly. Like, what do you mean? Like, that's like half my jokes are ready, half my jokes we're gonna find out if they're ready.
You know what? I think people have different ways of writing. So there's some people who work and try to perfect a joke before taking it to the stage. I think I'm that person. And then there's some people who work their material on stage.
Yeah, because I've
is
come up with so
different.
much more because of trying jokes out on
Yeah.
stage.
I
Like,
mean, not to say I don't try new stuff on stage. I do that quite often.
but you got more confidence in it. Whereas, like, I'll
Yeah.
literally go up with a concept, like, you know, or like a line and be like, cool, I'm gonna try to get 2 minutes out
Yeah.
of this and see what happens.
I think that I find that tricky because a significant amount of my content is a mix of one-liners, which plays on words a lot. So you want to refine the words before you take it to the stage.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're gonna be up on stage trying to think, how do I play the words and stuff? It can be difficult in that sense. It'll be too much work being on stage doing that, and you look unprepared.
Yeah, especially if you are trying to do like one-liners, like
Yeah.
off the top of your head. That's definitely a little bit more difficult because it's the exact opposite thing of, you know, when you're just waffling, you can just keep, it's the improv thing of if
Yeah.
you keep going, you'll find the funny. Whereas obviously if you're trying to be succinct, that's literally the exact opposite thing.
I think
And
it
do you ever
depends.
worry about that though? Like when you're doing a joke, like all one-liners and stuff, that you know that like you can't just carry on and make it funny. Like you're done.
Yeah,
Like,
with one-liners, it's like you say it and it's done. It's different from like a story where you carry people on a journey to maybe one big punchline, or the story in itself is just funny in terms of how the
and
the
it does
experience
just build
was.
and build and build.
Build.
So
So it is quite different. What I try to do with my comedy was, somebody told me when I started that I used to do one-liners, which is something I wasn't even aware of. But looking back now, I can see there's elements of that. So what I generally try to do with my comedy is I mix different styles into a set. So there are parts of my set which are one-liners. Some of it could be storytelling. So within a story, I could drop some one-liners, and that kind of balances it out. So even if I don't get a reaction on one single punchline, I could still continue with the story and have moments of winning the audience back, and then I give them one big payoff at the end also.
that is the key to like structuring your stuff like properly throughout there, so that you give
Yeah.
yourself and that's, I mean, even if you watch the bigger comedians, that's kind of what they do, you know. So like in 5 minutes, if 2 minutes of it like doesn't even hit,
Yeah.
you don't even really notice because they're just carrying on after that and they're going into the next thing that's probably going to be funny, like,
Mhm.
and they're just keeping you captivated the whole time. I think the biggest problem is if people aren't laughing and you're paying attention to them not laughing. Like if people aren't laughing and you're ignoring it and you just keep going,
Yeah.
and you will eventually tell them something that they laugh at.
I think it also depends on your style and confidence. And if you're telling a story, I've seen comedians do, like Jim Jeffries, for example, even Trevor Noah has I've seen some of his material where he can do like a 2 or 3 minute setup. For most new upcoming comedians, it's unheard of.
Well, you don't
For example,
get
you could get a 5 minute slot.
Yeah.
So you can't do a 3 minute setup. So I think the more stage time you have is what you can sort of play around. Maybe even do moments where you can lose the audience in the sense of getting a reaction, an instant reaction. But you can always win them back. But if you have less stage time, it's not something that's advisable to do.
So do you think it might be a little bit stifling in the beginning, you know, just having 5 minutes to do? Or do you think it's important that everyone just gets their tight five done first and then moves on?
I think it's important to have the tight five phase, because it really challenges you to just focus on being funny. Get in there, crush it, kill it, make people laugh, and that's your basic. You really just want to be funny, and then you have to get to other levels where you start choosing. Maybe you want to put a point across, which is also important. I mean, you can do it in 5 minutes, but it's not going to be easy because you have such a limited amount of time. Like, for example, I have certain sets of my material where I talk about very important topics, and I could just start talking real serious points within my sets. It's not necessarily funny, but because you've also learned how to engage an audience without sometimes having to give them strong,
And the thing is,
funny
when you've
lines.
got an hour to do that, like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a different
That
story
makes
to
a
when you've got
difference.
10 minutes to do that.
True. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have a number of gigs where maybe it's just me doing 40 minutes.
But you've also created that for yourself. Like, that's what people
Yeah.
don't really get is your career, you haven't really waited for other people to put you on. You've just gone and approached people and been like, yo, can I do an hour-long show at your hotel, please?
Yeah, I've done that. I've done that. I think artistically it helps because there's also that frustration where even if you're killing it for 5-10 minutes that you're given, you also say, but I also want to put a point across. But then when people are booking you only for 10-15 minutes, then you're like, it's not possible to do that. So you try to, well, I've tried to look for avenues to get around the system in terms of I want to be able to do my one-man shows. I want to just have a chat with an audience in a more relaxed environment. Sometimes where it's just you as an artist and you take people on this journey where they get to appreciate your art form in a relaxed environment where you set the pace for what you want to do.
But how did you... Okay, so you've done one-man shows. You've done a few of them, actually. You've done multiple hour-long shows now.
Yeah.
And you're still pretty new at the game. So I'm not going to ask you, like, how do you feel, blah, blah, blah. I want to ask you, how the fuck did you get people to your shows?
Oh, I know and I don't know at the same time because part of it has been luck. So I've been fortunate enough to, through the Jokes and Jazz show we were talking earlier, I learned a lot about marketing, running a lineup shows, and also being a promoter allows you to reach more people because you're more aggressively learning how to promote one particular event. And through that, I've managed to learn for my own show to be like, hey guys, so this time I'm doing a show by myself. So I built upon what I've gathered from that individual show to say this. And another approach I've used, most people don't do this in their shows. So if you're trying to sell 150 seats in a venue, it's not particularly that you have to approach 150 people. You could approach groups of people. So sort of direct marketing. So as an example, you've got friends you go out with sometimes. There's always an alpha in a group who, if that person is going out, everybody's going out. If that person is staying at home, everybody stays at home.
So for you, it's picking up who the alphas are in people's groups and
Yeah,
getting them
it's
to come to your show.
It's sneaky. I've done that as part of my marketing strategies because I use different approaches. So I've had to approach newspapers and radio. You've been one of the guys that helped me when you were hosting your radio show. And I approach companies, be like, hey guys, I've got a show. If I met maybe a staff member, I just tell everybody, hey guys, would your workplace be interested in attending my shows? So sometimes it's not necessarily about approaching 1,000 people, but just approaching one person who's a key to 1,000 people.
But what makes you think people are going to say yes?
It's, I think I get more no's than yeses.
Like, really?
Yes, I do. I've pitched, I've lost count how many ideas of comedy I've pitched to different venues, different sponsors and such things.
But how does that feel, man?
Most
Doesn't
of
it
the
get you
times-
down?
It does, but I think comedy, just the idea of being at stage has taught me so much in terms of how people respond to things. I've had shows that go badly because you're trying to impress an audience to laugh, and then they tell you, I've had people heckle me, tell me I'm not funny.
When
But
you know you're funny.
learn to pull through that because you've built the confidence or a certain consistent
So you
good
think-
reaction that
so just
eventually
Doing
you-
comedy has made you have a thick skin.
it certainly has. I've had people tell me horrible things while I'm on stage, even off the stage.
Off the stage, man.
not
I've had
funny.
people... Dude,
You can't do it.
How often has that happened for you? Like, how many times a year do, you get, someone after a show just be like, you're not funny, but that same night someone else comes up to you and is like, great show.
That's what keeps you going because you do a show and in the same audience, there's someone who is thinking you are the best thing that has ever happened to comedy, and there's another person who's telling you you're horrible.
Yeah, I even had
But-
2 people tonight who thought I was good, and I know they've got terrible taste, but
Yeah. What keeps me going the most is every time that has happened is that most people in my audience tell me I'm doing well, and then there's fewer people, the minority in the audience might not.
They probably
react as
just didn't like a
positively.
joke or two that you had
Yeah,
said.
yeah, but actually that's the funny thing is people who normally tell you that you suck probably just hold on to one joke that they didn't like, and then they tell you you're not funny, but the most of it is actually good. So in terms of marketing, the idea is always that not everybody is interested in coming to watch you perform or pushes you well, but there's a certain amount of people who are interested. You know this about marketing. For example, if you're promoting something on radio, you could have 20,000 or 100,000 listeners at
And
each
two
time.
people might care.
Yeah, and only 20. So, for example, you could invite an audience, SMS this, and contact us back. So there's only a very small portion of people who are going to be interested in what you're doing. So understanding that keeps me going.
So for you, it's just about that. You're like, cool. Like, I'm just gonna keep doing it. I'm gonna get enough people by playing the numbers. So I'll have 1,000 people at a show one day by chatting to one person out of every 10. Like,
Yeah.
or chatting to 10 people and getting one person out of all of them to come to a show.
I think that's part of the approach is I think that there's certain technical skills you need to be able to apply in both. So in my approach is I go, there's how many people are in Durban?
Like 9 million, I think.
Okay, let's say
Maybe-
it's
probably
9
less,
million
Probably less.
or 9 million people. I'm trying to
I
feel.
think 9 million's in KZN, but no, there's 40. Like, and probably I don't know, 9 million in Durban. Let's just say.
Okay, let's play with 9 million people in Durban. 9 million is a huge number. 9 million exceeds Moses Mabhida, but
yeah, by a little bit.
that is the biggest venue in
But we
KZN.
can't even sell Moses Mabhida out for anything except for a Chiefs game.
Yeah, you can't, or World Cup, which is not coming back. But what I can say is there's 9 million. Think about it this way: there's 9 million people in Durban. You want to try to market to all of them,
And
but
hope
this is
you hit
impossible.
But hope you hit the ones.
But you want to target the ones that might come to your show. But at the same time, you want to reach the widest amount of people as possible. So for me, I do that elimination and go, of the 9 million people in Durban, 99% of them can't afford a comedy ticket. So you're already scaling it down to, because there's poverty and all those things. And of all the people that can
That's
afford...
rich talk coming from a Zimbabwean, but okay.
And of all the people that can afford comedy shows, some of them don't even care about comedy. They wouldn't want to go to a comedy show. So you're already scaling down. So there's so you already rejected by 99 point something % of people already, just by the fact that you're in comedy and they don't care about it. So in my head, I'm already been rejected by most people. So if one person tells me they're not coming to my show, it's not that I don't care, but I'm already like...
But you're expecting it.
Yeah, I'm expecting it. Statistically, most people wouldn't come to a comedy show anyway.
That's a very interesting way to look at it.
That's how I look at it.
Damn, I need to change my perspective, man. Because I'm just like, fuck you, man. Why'd you come support my shit? I was at your show 9 years ago when you were a bass player in a shitty funk band. And like, I supported you. I mean, I didn't actually support you. I didn't pay to get in. And I thought your band was shit. But still, why didn't you come to my show, man?
Yeah,
no,
most
like,
people really just wouldn't come.
fuck, I mean, that's like, but then how do you take hope out of that, man? How do you not go, most people are not going to come to my show, like, fuck this?
I think my understanding is the very fact that even most people wouldn't go to Trevor Noah's show by those standards.
I mean, a lot of people go to Trevor Noah
A
shows.
lot would, but in terms of the general amount of people in the country, most
I mean, in
people
terms of
wouldn't.
being able to afford to go to the shows,
Yeah.
not as many. But, I mean, if you gave everyone in South Africa a free ticket to Trevor Noah's show, I think most of South Africa would go.
Yeah, I mean, he's reached that level of stardom where he can do that. But I think
He also just
for most of
appeals
us-
to the, like, general public more than I think almost anyone has in a long time.
Yeah,
And I mean, it might be because, like, he, like, has the right people around him writing, like, the right stuff. And, like, they're able to work on sets that, like, suit different audiences. I think that's probably his biggest strength, is picking the right material
Yeah.
for the right time.
I can say it's hard for me to comment on that because I'm not really well informed on the ins of how he does his.
Oh no, I didn't mean like
individual-
about that. I meant more just
Yeah.
for him, he hit like, so regardless of whether or not like he has writers or whatever, it's his material is selected for the general zeitgeist. Like there's a lot of thought into
True.
how much of this is going to appeal, and he also makes
To the
his stuff
widest
appeal
audience.
to the widest
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I find difficult at this particular point in comedy is there's so many of us that if someone as big as him existed now, it would be impossible for him to reach where he is now.
You think so? You don't think that he? I mean, I do think like he's on stage very, very good.
He's very good. What I'm saying,
Like
though,
he's
is
above the level of
the-
most comedians.
the pool of comedy now has way too many people claiming portions of it that for anyone,
You don't think he'd be able to rise above?
I don't think he would. He's still talented. I think what helped him is just having been in the game earlier than people who came later.
Maybe, but I mean, I think he had quite a bit of competition around him at the time.
I mean, he's great. I think he's one of the funniest guys.
I mean, I've got my
ever
issues
come
with
out.
the whole like him being accused of joke theft stuff,
Yeah.
and like, you know, I mean that he's like, I know he's got writers, like whatever, like that's, I mean, Ron White has writers, like lots of comedians have writers, and like
yeah.
it's a controversial topic, and it's the same thing as like, you know, rappers with a ghostwriter. Some people are always going to put an asterisk next to your name.
You know,
But at the same time, if you're performing the show and it's original material and people are laughing and it's going well, who am I to hate you?
I feel you. Well, there's two things we're talking about here, though. The first one being about originality and that kind of thing. So, judging by how we've spoken earlier in this conversation, is there's also that difficulty with creativity now, that it's hard being original because almost everything's been talked about.
Yeah, so it's
So
about
that's,
your
that's the one
perspective.
aspect of it. Then the second aspect is the way South African comedy is now. I know people who wouldn't go to a comedy show because there's no Indian comedian on the lineup. They go, it's not for me. I like petty comedy. I like Tswana comedy. And it's such a difficult thing for some of us. Because, for example, I can't speak some of the South African languages. I don't speak Afrikaans. I don't speak Tswana. I don't speak Pedi. And there's comedians who are huge now in the country, but they're only huge within a particular group of the country. So if you are a comedian coming through trying to be a new Trevor Noah who's going to appeal to the widest group, it's still going to be difficult because these people are like, yeah, I would only go to watch Skumba. I would only go to watch Riyad Musa.
Okay, now I get you. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
what I mean.
Because they've got
Yeah.
their demographically correct comedian.
Yeah, it's very tight knit to a particular culture, so it's hard for people to break out of that.
And how
we,
much of
we had
comedy
a
do you
huge star on our show today. It was huge in KZN, but the tricky part for them is who else is on the lineup. Those guys are not familiar to us, so I'm just gonna stay at home.
I mean, possibly.
Possibly,
But,
yeah.
I mean, there's lots of different things. I also think just booking a big name isn't always enough, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole marketing dilemma to it, the time of the show, the
And how
venue.
much, okay, so you've spoken a lot about marketing and you clearly care a lot about marketing, but how much of this is what you really want to be doing, and how much of, like, are you a Kevin Hart type, you know, like Kevin Hart's all about the business and, you know, like marketing everything, and he thinks like in that regard whilst doing everything else? Or are you someone who would rather just be working on the comedy and have someone else running the business side of things, and you just find yourself having to do the marketing side?
I think it depends on where you are in terms of growth. So I don't necessarily have a big audience enough to be able to have like a full team to say this one's doing my marketing, my promotion, you know. So
I'm saying, what would you
I haven't
prefer?
reached that capacity, but I would love to. I would love to be spending my whole day just writing material, going to places, experiencing cultures, so I can inform my content with.
So you don't enjoy
Wider.
the promoting side of things as much?
I'll be honest, it's not fun because I really just want to be an artist who can perform things. I mean, the ability to specialize in that, it's nice now to have to enrich yourself with experience, to know what it's like to promote. It helps you grow in terms of understanding the business with regards to those aspects of things. So you want to get to a point where you become big enough, and then when you are directing people to do things, you know what it's like, you know the challenges, so you've learned that aspect of things. I've had big shows that I've sold out marketing for myself, but it actually affected me by the time I got on stage because I was so exhausted from
Dude, that's like when I
doing the
perform
work.
at the festival. Like this year in particular. Last year, like I was fine. I did my one-man show and it went pretty well. Like I performed well. I like handled. But this year, I just did. I think I was okay at the roast battle, but my 10 minutes that I did, like I didn't even book myself for like a long slot, but I just wasn't there. Like I wasn't good. Like I watched the footage of it afterwards, and it was fine. Like it was a totally fine set. But like I look at it and I'm just like, you are not present at all in this show. Like you are literally just a dude on stage telling jokes. Like there's no part of you who's actually thinking about anything you're doing right now. Because the whole time, you know, I was on stage, it was just like thinking about the festival.
You don't want to be that, and it's actually a lot of work that I totally understand now. People who have managers and just teams that do their marketing and things, it helps you so much because you relax, you know, everything is taken care of, which is why I've found it easier to do those shows you were talking about earlier, where people just say, we're booking you to come do a solo show, and all you have to do is just pitch up and perform. And I can tell you, those shows have been so much more better and stress-free to do than the ones that I have to do groundwork, marketing, and performing, and, you know, directly pitching myself to people, which is much harder.
Much harder, man.
Yeah.
I feel you. That's the thing. Like, I'm not even a good promoter, like, at all. I hate doing it. Like, I've just done it out of necessity, essentially.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, like, how much it, you know, affects my comedy. Like, you know, just focusing so much and just trying to get people to the show instead of, you know, focusing on what I'm going to say when I'm on stage. So by the time you get on stage, you're just like, oh, well, here's jokes I wrote 3 months ago. Instead of, like, you know, here's some fresh shit that I've been working on today, like, for you guys.
I mean, I remember when I did my show in Durban, man, because I'm also like, I think I've learned how to do the promotional side of things, but if you want to do it perfectly, it means you literally won't have time to prepare for the show. Yeah. It's so much work to do, especially when you're doing a big show where you want to target a very huge amount of people. So get a team if you can, if you have the capacity, and one can only hope you grow and get to a point where you'll be able to do that. And if any comedian is listening, my friend, get a team. Get a team. An A team. It helps.
Get an A team. Get an A team. And do you have a team at the moment? Who are you working with? Because we're gonna go towards the end of this. You've just moved to Joburg now.
Yes.
Why did you move there?
I moved to Joburg because everything is bigger and I'd reached a ceiling in Durban, artistically. So,
Carbon Goldstone, you know, just goes to Dubai from Durban. He goes to, you know, Australia from Durban. He goes to. So what do you mean you reached the ceiling?
Or by reaching a ceiling in Durban, I mean that in terms of what I could achieve, I feel like I've peaked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've peaked.
But you don't feel like you could use this as a platform to go elsewhere? I mean, because we were even discussing earlier, like how when you would go to Joburg before from Durban, like it was almost easier.
Well, it's tricky because last year before I moved, I realized that most of my bookings were actually coming out of town, mostly in Joburg. So it made more sense to be stationed there. So there's that aspect of things. So from that perspective, it made more sense to relocate. And in Durban, I've made enough contacts and connections to still expand in the direction I want to expand, even if I'm not there anymore. I have the CV, I have the contacts, I can still knock certain doors.
And people know who you are, like just in general.
Yeah.
So it's about now exploring new audiences in a new space.
It's not necessarily that I'm going to grow in Joburg, but I'm going to just kind of create a name now. It's almost like I need to do what I've done in Durban and use what I've built here to expand there.
And do you feel like because you've done relatively well in Durban that it's, you're probably going to be able to do relatively well in Joburg?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky thing because I'm not a prophet, so I can't particularly say everything is going to go well. You can only try.
But I mean, what is your thinking in it? Like, because I would assume that a lot of people say that, if you can make it in Durban, you can make it anywhere in this country. So does a part of you feel like, hey, I'm probably going to be okay, like I can probably make it in Joburg because I've done well here?
No, I can't say because I've done well here, because the environment is completely different. So the rules are not the same. Joburg is a lot more established than Durban is. So in terms of cracking into the comedy industry itself, that could be difficult because people have established networks and you trying to go and interrupt those circles, which is not an easy thing to do. So one approach could be interrupt and break into the circle, or just create your own circle, which is a different ball game altogether. So that will come with, contacting, getting the right contacts, building your own new contacts. I've heard... this is going to be something I've never told anyone. In terms of trying to establish new circles, some months ago, when I was setting up for the move to Joburg, I was contacting many different people, and I almost got this huge corporate client, and someone recommended me. Everything was set up. It turns out these people already have a hired comedian who they work with, and his name is Mark Lottering.
Oh, snap.
You can only imagine. I'm knocking this door and this door is opening, but they open and say, hey, actually, there's already somebody else in here and his profile is 100 times bigger than yours. So that was
it's nice to be considered for the same job as Mark Lottering, I guess.
That's how I took it. On the bright side, I was like, I've been considered for this, so maybe I've made the waves in the right way. It's sad that I didn't get it, but it actually inspired me to push much more, to say I need to just knock on the right door. If they're willing to consider someone with my CV for someone Mark Lottering would be considered for, maybe. I mean, I'll get something one day. So I've got things that are coming up that I'm working on, and I don't want to say things that haven't been confirmed because I don't want people laughing to say you failed at this.
But have you found the move?
The move has been a difficult one, but in all fairness, I haven't approached the scene with aggressively.
But the scene knows you though. Like, you don't necessarily you've got to ask for slots, obviously.
Yeah.
But people you're not gonna struggle. Like, you've been going up to Joburg and doing weeks at a time.
I mean, I can, relatively speaking, I can sort of easily get on lineups to jump on Tier 5, get some exposure to the audiences. But the industry knows me, but it's the comedians know me. But in terms of audiences, don't know me. There was a show we did at Shakers in February. So it's a new comedy club they opened up. So in the month of February, the entire month was free entry. And the first show, which was the paid for, I was booked as a headliner.
So no one came?
No. We actually had a huge audience. So I feel that show made me understand that sometimes it's not necessarily about how you market and act, but that show was mainly built around the reputation of the show itself. That it's very good, it has high quality acts. So people are like, we don't know this guy, but we're gonna come anyway.
And so is there pressure there, or is that more like a relief thing now? Because the audience thinks you're good. So do you feel more confident, or do you feel less confident?
I think it was more rewarding for me rather than for the venue. It didn't add much to them because people were coming because of the venue rather than because of me. So for me, I benefited knowing that.
But I just meant, how did you approach that?
I approached it now as a challenge that I have to give to these people value, because they're coming here, they're giving me the benefit of the doubt, and I would say I delivered a day. So that was very helpful, and I ended up getting something else through that. So.
Would you say there was more pressure or less pressure?
Yeah, more pressure, I would say. Also because you've moved to a new place, so you want to be as good as you can, so that people will be willing to give you a second chance.
Yeah, there's nothing I hate more than sucking in another city.
That is horrible.
And I would like for years I
horrible.
didn't do it. Like for years, like I killed like whenever like I left Durban, like I did well.
Mhm.
And then like in the last year, like I had like a bad Cape Town show, and then recently like I had like an average Joburg show, and then another average Joburg show, and I've just been like, what am I doing with my life? Like this is where it's meant to be easy, like because that's what I find like going to Joburg. I love it there because I'm like, oh wait, you're gonna get the jokes. Like I can just tell you like I can tell you the good stuff. You know, I can give you that like higher grade stuff that I keep in the back pocket that I don't really get to tell in Durban when like I go to Joburg essentially.
Yeah, I find Joburg audience to be a lot more mature, and their comedy is different from Durban because their audiences are not as one-dimensional as it is here.
Yeah.
Where everyone's mixed. You go into a room and there's just people from all kinds of backgrounds. So that also pushes you as an artist now to try and appeal to a wider margin of people rather than you would when you're here, which is why Joburg people spill over more into Durban rather than Durban people splashing into Joburg.
But Joburg is also complaining about coming to Durban. Like they do.
They struggle here.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
everyone struggles about coming here because, and yeah, there isn't that universality. Like essentially,
It's
like you
not
try
there,
to
yeah.
make it universal for people, what they do, and then like they kind of like suffer a little bit because, yeah, we've got these audiences that are so just as stereotypical as you can get, and like
It's so awful, man.
and I guess
So awful.
that's why like our best comedians, and I put that in inverted commas, like our most popular comedians are the most hacky, generic, like I'm saying this, you can look at me like that, that's totally fine.
No, I'm trying to think, yeah.
But like, you know, that do hit those stereotypical marks, who do like who are able to tell the white jokes, the Indian jokes, the black jokes, and like, you know, to those audiences, and also tell the black jokes to the white audiences, and tell, you know, the black jokes to the Indian audiences, and the Indian jokes to the Indian audiences, and like the white jokes to the black audiences as well. You know, they do that crossover thing of racism essentially.
Yeah.
And that's why like here in Durban, you know, people get away with telling more stereotypical jokes because that's what the audience likes. Whereas
But
if
you
you
know-
try that in Joburg, people will fucking be like, what the fuck are you saying? That is so racist. Are you kidding? Like,
I know what you're saying, but what I've also gotten to appreciate is that the difference is Durban prepares you for other audiences in a unique way, because our audiences are so specific about what they demand. It teaches you to be able to adapt with, like, so you move
within
from
specificity.
if you're doing a show in Glenwood and you go perform in Umlazi or Hillcrest, it's completely different to such a degree that it teaches you adaptability. So when you move now, when you go to do Joburg, maybe you could do average, but if you move even overseas, it's easier because you've learned how to hop on from one show which is completely the opposite of the next one. So in a way, it prepares you. And I appreciate Devon for that, which is, it's taught me how to adapt quite.
I love Durban, but I've like not enjoyed doing comedy in Durban if I really look back at it properly. There are a handful of shows in the city that I've
Yeah.
enjoyed. Most of them have felt like work.
Yeah. Although the one thing I could say in reflection of the show we did earlier today, there were two people that came to me who were completely in love with the show. They fell in love with it. And they complained that it wasn't marketed widely enough. It was marketed, but the thing is, Durban's disadvantage is we don't work well with our local media platforms.
Yeah,
so
like your
much,
North
and they're also
News
very
your
resistant to putting on promotion of local events.
Yeah, because they want money.
Because they want money. In Joburg, it's such a different
Well, yeah, because
thing
they're
where-
getting money from actual advertisers, and they understand that. Yeah, put the gig in the thing because people are going to like look at the magazine, and the ad above it is going to have more value. Yeah,
It makes such a difference because people here come and tell you, we've never seen you maybe on radio, TV, and you're like, but you
Dog,
know,
I was on radio and people still don't know who I am. Like, I had a
It's-
drive
yeah.
time radio show, and it's still like Yeah, I mean, even whatever. Like,
Totally unfair.
it's
Totally
totally,
unfair.
but it's fun though as well because I mean, there's still lots of people who have no clue who East Coast radio DJs are as well, and
But-
they've got a reach of millions. So
That's what makes it difficult to market things now, because some of these TV and radio shows legitimize the scene.
yep,
So
entirely.
yeah, they do. So when you approach people to tell them you've got an event, that's one thing I find difficult too, to say,
The
hey guys,
gatekeepers
I've
of
got
sorts.
this awesome product. Jokes and Jazz is an amazing show.
And
We've
it's
had.
9 years down. Oh, nine like
Yeah,
gigs
it's
in.
been nine shows over the past 3 years, and people that come there fall in love with the thing, and they tell you, how do we not know about this? And I'm like, yeah, we always send radio people. We tell them, guys, we've got this one to put on. Can you give us an interview? And they go, no, we want corporate money, so we can't. So I mean, it's a challenge that we have to overcome at some point. So part of the reason why I've moved to Joburg also is I want to connect more with these brands and try to allow them to. If you can promote an event in Joburg and sell out in Durban, but if you promote in Durban, you might not be able to sell out. It happens.
That's.
So
I think we're gonna end there, but that
Yeah.
is a sad. It's a sad ending, but it's a real one. And this has been a really real conversation. I've really enjoyed this. Like
Yeah.
you've been one
we should have a part 2. There's so many things we didn't talk about.
Of course,
But
I mean,
yeah.
but you wanted to just talk comedy, so we just spoke comedy tonight.
Yeah.
It's like, we
Yeah.
might get personal another time. But
Any
yeah,
stalkers, I'm sorry you couldn't get anything today.
it's all good. I don't want you to land up in a Zimbabwean jail. So we'll keep the personal stuff, or maybe when the politics are a little bit different. Thanks so much for your time, bro. Thank you for doing this. I'm really appreciative of it, especially last minute vibes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Perfect.